Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
Good governance with good intentions are the hallmark of a government. Implementation with integrity should be the co-passion. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. We meet again Monday night at 9:30 p.m. live right here on TV1. Today was quite an eventful day for Sri Lanka, as the first time in the Sri Lankan history it was recorded that a sitting Prime Minister appeared before a presidential commission of inquiry. There were many revelations and the bond has now transformed into a bomb. The Prime Minister, speaking at the Commission of Inquiry when he was questioned, said that he knew the relationship between the former governor's son-in-law, Arjuna Aloysius, who was involved in bond transactions, and if that was the case, why did the Prime Minister appoint the former governor, Arjuna Mahendran, as the governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka? John Exeter's report, who was the founding governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, very clearly articulates that the governor of the Central Bank should be a man with unquestioned integrity. Tonight, on our show, we discuss about the future of the Commission of Inquiry, what would transpire in the next few days, next few months, and what would be the fate of our dear Prime Minister, the former governor, the ministers who were involved in the bond scam. Tonight on the show, we have invited four eminent personalities to the studios. They are a regular vocalist and have been very vocal on Sri Lanka's biggest bond scam in its history. So let me quickly introduce them to you. Joining us this evening is Kirti Tendakon, Executive Director of the Campaign for a Free and Fair Election. Joining us this evening on the show is Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. President's Council, Mr. Hemantha Warnakulasira, joins us this evening as well. Also joining us this evening is Mr. Rusiripala Tendakon, who is a senior banker. Let's start off tonight's show with Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Dr. Vijayawardena, something that everyone wanted. They wanted the Prime Minister to appear before the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, testify before the Commission, and tell his side of the story. Were you satisfied with the answers that was given out by the Prime Minister?
Of course, Samir, we'll have to appreciate the fact that Prime Minister has appeared before the Commission and clarified his position to the Commissioners, so that Commissioners can take a note of what he has said and they can make a judgment for themselves. For us to make an evaluation of what the Prime Minister has said, Samir, we don't have information about the transaction that had taken place inside the Bond Commission today. So until we get the detailed transcription of the matters that have been discussed, we are not in a position to say whether we are satisfied or not. But in my view, the Prime Minister's appearance before Commission itself is a positive development.
Dr. Vijayawardena, let me make you cognizant about what transpired with regard to the Monetary Law Act of Sri Lanka. When the Prime Minister was questioned about his authority over deciding on policies taken under the Monetary Law Act, he said that based on the constitution of the country, he can decide on the policy which applies to all institutions under the government. But this is not the case.
Yeah,
we know that very clearly.
That's not the case, Samir, because in 1949, when the Monetary Law Act was enacted by the very same Parliament, the Parliament has given that power to a board called the Monetary Board. And the Monetary Board is the one which would decide on the interest rates and the monetary policy of Sri Lanka. And no government or no cabinet or no minister or no politician or no bureaucrat can intervene in the affairs of the Monetary Board. And of course, it's well protected in the Monetary Law Act itself. And that's the way the central banks have been operating throughout the world, not only our Central Bank of Sri Lanka, all the central banks throughout the world enjoy this autonomy. And in terms of the Monetary Law Act, Samir, the The provision is that unlike the other public institutions where the minister in charge can issue specific and general directions to the board of directors of those institutions, in the case of the Monetary Law Act, the Minister of Finance or Prime Minister or even the President cannot issue directions to the Monetary Board, and the Monetary Board has the full powers to undertake the monetary policy of Sri Lanka. But of course, if there is any difference of opinion between the Monetary Board and the government in power at that particular point of time, there is a special provision that has been provided for in the Monetary Law Act where the Minister of Finance, not the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance can issue a directive in writing to the Monetary Board indicating that whatever the consequences as a result of that directive would be assumed by the government of the country. So, to do that, the Minister of Finance cannot issue that directive alone. He has to get the approval of the cabinet before he does so, because it's a joint responsibility.
In the Sri Lankan history, Dr. Wijawardhan,
there is only one case in Sri Lanka, because all the ministers of finance had been, even the prime ministers had been complying with this the golden rule that has been enshrined in the Monetary Law Act. There was only one case in 1959, the Prime Minister Vijayananda Dahanayaka. He wanted to win the election that was to be to take place in 1960. So he issued a directive to the central bank, the Monetary Board, to reduce the interest rates. But but of course he said that he would be taking full responsibility for the direction that he had issued. And of course in the following election, he took the full responsibility and he lost even his seat in Galle.
Dr. Wijawardhan brought in this classic example in 1959 about Mr. Dahanayaka losing not only his prime ministerial position, but also lost his seat in Galle. Would this be the fate of the UNP government at the next election, given the fact that they have interfered with the Monetary Law Act of Sri Lanka? Your time starts now.
Samir, we know that history repeats. So we hope that history repeats this time in this same manner, because the interference to us who are alert and vigilant about what the government is doing about these monetary policies and how they are trying to interfere, how they are trying to sort of interpret their rights and their authority about the monetary law functioning and about the activities of monetary policy. I mean, it's very, for us, of course, we are estranged by such things, because government should know the limit or the area in which they can interfere into these matters. Unfortunately, as pointed out here by Dr. Wijawardhan, the government doesn't, it appears that the government has not taken this note of these regulations and the laws that are in force. That is why now we see recently in Parliament we heard that the former Minister of Finance virtually accusing the central bank for intervening with the government policy. So he had not been able to differentiate between the relationship between the government policy on financial matters and the government policy what should be on monetary policy. So he has not seen this difference. So these things are happening. So in such a context, we only hope that history is the only one. By repeating itself, if they bring us solace, we will be happy.
Mrs. Dendakon, I heard that you were not allowed to enter today's Commission of Inquiry proceedings. So I'm going to ask you a question about the outside environment, how it appeared, because there was a demonstration that was organized by powerful ministers attached to the UNP. You saw many of them, and there were some notable absentees as well. Sujiva Senasinghe was not present, Ravi Karanayaka was not present, and the man who wrote a book about the truth and what transpired on the bond scam, Sujiva Senasinghe, was also not present. Why? Did it surprise you?
Yes, actually the happenings there when we saw was a little I mean unusual and not very pleasant to see, and to see the whole lot of cabinet there. For what purpose? To support whom? To give strength to whom? I mean, this is the thing. Now the whole question again, I like to point out one thing, that the Prime Minister going before the Commission is wrong. It is not the Prime Minister that went there. It is the Minister in charge of the central bank, the function of the central bank, that was summoned. Prime Minister had no role there. It is true that Mr. Wickremesinghe is wearing two hats. That of the Prime Minister, that of the Minister in charge of the central bank. He was summoned before this commission to question and to get clarifications about his role as the Minister in charge of the central bank. The question of Prime Minister and these, prerogatives and priorities and importance to be adduced to the Prime Minister in questioning should not have arisen in this case.
So the Prime Minister knew, based on a question that was sent to me by a viewer, so the Prime Minister knew that there was a conflict of interest. If that's the case, even after 2.5 years, why did the Prime Minister appoint Arjuna Mahendran as an advisor?
This is one question we were trying to find answers during last 1.5 years continuously. We might have wrote something like 10 to 12 letters to different people to get an answer. We raised this issue with Ravi Karunanayake. We raised it with the President, and we was not able to get an answer. Still, I think we didn't got a clear answer. And this is one particular question to be get answered by Prime Minister, which did not happen today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barakul Suri, I want to ask you a question, taking cue from Mr. Tendakon. He mentioned about not Mr. Livera or De Livera or Mr. Yasantha Kodaguda posed questions from the Prime Minister at the Commission of Inquiry today. It was someone completely outside of this framework. That was the Attorney General himself coming and asking questions from the Prime Minister. Didn't you find this, as a lawyer, as a President's counsel, a conflict of interest as well?
No, Samir, I'm disappointed. I'm sorry to say that all the efforts, the media in this country and others like my friends who are sitting on either side of my chair, what they have done to unearth and to explain to the people, even Mr. Tendakon, about this huge bank robbery, like the great bank robbery of Sri Lanka, has ended in an anticlimax. I believe I'm ashamed that everyone there, even the fact that Mr. Susiripala could not get into the courtroom or to the commission room. There were demonstrations, there were people outside, they were shouting slogans. This reminded me of the day where Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, the leader of the opposition, was summoned before another commission. He was summoned before the Batlanda Commission, and we were all strongly supporting him at that event, and we all went to court, and there were a huge crowd that rushed into court and prevented the proceedings also, and he was questioned by Mr. Jamana, the present bribery commissioner. And likewise, today, being the Prime Minister, I don't know why, the reason why Mr. Dappul Livera or Mr. Yasantha Kodaguda could not question him.
Mr. Barakul, do you think that if Mr. De Livera or Mr. Kodaguda questioned the Prime Minister today, the tone of the questioning or even the questioning would have been a bit different?
Definitely. You must understand, I don't blame the Present Attorney General. He's a very mild-mannered person. He's the person who talks, who questions. I mean, his style is different. And Mr. Jayanta Jayasuriya, when he questioned the Prime Minister, he was very, very courteous to him. And I do not know why there should be that courtesy extended to anybody. He's a witness. And the questions that should follow. Now, for instance, one of the most important questions that were asked, where the Attorney General wanted was, why did the Prime Minister after appointing Mr. Gamini, Pittipan and 2 others, and appointing a committee or a commission to go into this probe initially, why didn't he follow the recommendations? And one of the things that the Pittipan Commission recommended was that there must be a forensic audit, and so that you can explain, you can find out the digital footprint of the entire transaction. Now, you must understand, Mr. Gamini Pittipan was a member of the UMP Lawyers Association, but we must all respect him, irrespective of, like the others who are now trying to defend the Prime Minister. They were given a job, and they tried to do an independent job and file a report. Now the question is, did the Prime Minister ever order a forensic report? And when he just said, yes, I gave it to the Parliament. Now that's a very strange thing. The next question is, why should he give it to the Parliament?
Thank you very much.
We are not a parliamentary committee.
Mr. Tenago, now everyone is all of a sudden talking about tapping telephone calls and records of telephone calls coming out, and it's an infringement of privacy, so on and so forth. But isn't it, when you look at it this way, none of the ministers or the parliamentarians had to give their phone records to any commission or the CID. It was just one person's mobile phone that was looked into, and that was Mr. Arjun Aloysius's phone. So in that way, if you look at it, the rumors that are spreading that the government is tapping into people's phones and the privacy being, in harm's way, this is, you can't talk about it, right?
Yeah, the issue here, I mean, we saw so much of manipulation coming on with this telephone recordings issue, and it was Arjuna Aloysius' phone which was get the reports of the records of this particular phone, and based on that information, these calculations and information was spread out. It was not phone tapping, or it was not going into the details of the committee members for that matter, or the parliamentarians or the other associated people around him. So I think, I mean, we are not talking about, this commission is not about telephones or the house renting or something. We are specifically talking about a mandate of a commission to find out what happened with the treasury bond and nothing else. So to deviate the attention out of that, we are some other groups are trying to talk about the telephone tapping and telephone conversations and all that. Even the house renting is, I mean, a very small part of that. Just focus on the ultimate mandated function of the commission. Let's talk about, focus on the treasury bond issue, what is the most
Mr. Nicole, do
disturbing
you agree with what yes, sir.
Yeah, those very people who talk about telephone tapping, they know for certainty there was no telephone tapping, there was no recording of the telephones. Why do they do this? They want to confuse the public. I saw today in Parliament, a point was taken by the leader of the House and informing the Speaker that they want a select committee appointed, or they want some information. Now, what happened actually? What happened in this regard was this: that they got information. They had Arjuna Mahindra's telephone. You must understand, the most important telephone was not there. That was destroyed according to Arjuna Aloysius in Singapore.
The child has thrown into the swimming pool.
So now with this telephone, they got all the records. And how did they get that? They made an application to the commissioners. Commissioners gave an order in writing to the CID. Then the CID got the telephone, the service providers, to provide all the information, all the details. That is where all the details came. And some are asking, why not Namal Rajapaksa's telephone call? Now that doesn't come within the mandate of the commission. If they want to,
So are you saying that Namal Rajapaksa also had dealings with Arjuna?
No, there some asking.
You just
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying Namal Rajapaksa and various others. Now, for instance, even very important members of the government, they have had telephone calls to Arjuna Losha. Now that has nothing to do with the members of the COPE committee. Now COPE committee has now taken up the position that telephones have been tapped and it's parliamentary privileges. I don't know how.
Mr.
And not only that, I must tell you that there is an attempt, there's an attempt by some members of parliament to have a judicial committee of the parliament and in fact name some of those people, CID officers, and even Mr. Jasanta Goda, the President's Council, who submitted this report as accused. So you can see how the thieves get together. They get together, 40 thieves, to protect their own interests.
Mr. Tenakon, a quick question to you now. With what Mr. Vanukulu said, there is no necessity to tap the mobile phones of the UNP COPE members, because we see 23 calls, 2 calls, and 67 calls.
And 657 calls.
I take special notice about this word that you are using constantly, tapping the telephone.
Yeah.
This is not tapping.
Yeah.
In a murder case, when the murderer has to be traced, they go into evidence that is available. Whether it is a recorded statement, whether it's a book written by somebody, whether it's a letter that is written, whether it's a telephone conversation that is recorded, they go into that. This is a normal thing in evidence. Tapping is another process. Tapping is when you are calling somebody, you use a mechanism or a device to listen to that. Is this the same thing?
No, but I will tell you with responsibility, there was no recording, it's not available. What was available was only what the service providers gave them. Yeah. So it's nothing illegal. What they did was perfectly legal. They got the permission, they got the sanction from the judges, from the commissioners, and got this information.
That's where the manipulation comes. We should be. Everyone knows it in social media. These Ajit P. Pereira's. Conversation pretended to be Ajit P. Pereira's was published, and actually there was no recording as such. So it was the numbers given, how many phone calls were made into and out of Ajit P. Pereira.
That's not a question here, Mr. Nikon. Whether Ajit P. Pereira spoke for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes, it's not the question. He was a member of the COPE committee. Yeah. If he had dealings with...
That's where the manipulation came.
Member of Mr. Sena Singh told in Parliament, what is wrong? Yeah. What is wrong if I gave a call to Arjuna Losha? Yeah, if they are friends. No, this is the... Now, you understand, they have almost admitted the guilt. They have almost admitted they have spoken to each other.
I think the point we should make there is that 62 out of his 200-odd calls was made during the currency of the COPE sittings. And that's the problem. And he's not addressing that issue. But while we've been talking, Mr. Vanukulu, we have information that out of Zimbabwe, that President Robert Mugabe, his impeachment process will start on Tuesday. Now, do you think that there is such a possibility to impeach our Prime Minister?
I believe, I feel sorry for you and for all other media people who think that something drastic will happen in this Bond Commission. I believe today's episode, the manner in which the Attorney General questioned, and then the directions that were given by someone to question him, all that will show that this will ultimately, there will be nothing. I'm so sorry to say.
Which is why I'm asking you about the question about the impeachment.
Impeachment is something that happened in countries where there is civilized process. Now in Zimbabwe, I don't say so. I don't say so, but what I'm trying to say, impeachment, this is that will never end up in anything. I believe all of us will talk, and ultimately Prime Minister will go on till the end of 2000, the next election, and they will talk and nothing will happen. Sometimes they may find some scapegoat and file some action in the High Court against some few people. That's all.
It seems like the Prime Minister is putting the ball onto Mr. former Governor Arjuna Mahendan's side and saying, I asked you to remove the son-in-law from the director position. I asked you to do this in good faith. and basically you have not done it, so this is not my fault. That's the final outcome, what we gather from it. Why is that happening?
No, that's correct, Chaturanga, because the governor Mahendran would have seen to it that he doesn't have any conflict of interest at the time he was appointed as a governor, and if his son-in-law had been continuing to control the perpetual treasuries as the major shareholder of the perpetual holding company, that itself is a manipulation of the system. So Governor Mahendran would have seen to it that, and so if the responsibility has been given to Governor Mahendran, I will see another aspect to that, because there is a board, monetary board, because it's not the governor who is the head of the central bank. The head of the central bank is the monetary board. If the monetary board has not taken any action, Chaturanga, the whole monetary board is responsible for that.
And even when changing the placement system from the Prime Minister is once again saying, in March we heard him say, I advised the system to be changed because there were malpractices in the previous system. But now again we see the point where the subject minister or the governor cannot take that decision. Once again the monetary board should be taking that decision.
It's the monetary board. That's why the things have gone wrong, Chaturanga, because the Prime Minister can give any direction. We can't find fault with the Prime Minister or any other minister for giving directions to the central bank. But the monetary board should not accede to those directions unless the board agrees to them. Now here what had happened is the monetary board was very silent.
Let me add something. When we saw this, Prime Minister answering these questions, one thing I felt is that the Prime Minister has mixed up with the public finance with the monitoring. Monitoring is a job of the monitoring board, and the public finance might be the case with the parliament. So I think definitely he got messed it up.
Mr. Dr. Vijayawardena, I'm just going to ask you, you say that Arjuna Mahendran should have seen to it that his son-in-law should have done whatever, but do you think that even though they lived in the same house, they didn't discuss these matters?
That's the thing.
Like
It's actually, it arouses suspicion from the people, because that he had access to the information which Arjuna Mahendran would have known. His son-in-law would have had access to it, but of course we cannot presume it for us, because we don't know whether they have discussed it or not. And
but of course those the recorded conversations between Aloysius and Kasun Palisena, his CEO, displays an uncanny ability on the part of Mr. Aloysius to predict at what rate the state institutions were going to bid.
Yeah, that of course, for us, I think the information came from people who had been paid out by perpetual treasuries like this, Little Charlie, New Charlie, Little John and all that. All those people had supplied advance information to the perpetual treasuries. And
so who do you think was the biggest Charlie out of the lot?
We don't know. They have not been named, but of course people have the suspicion about it. But the information had been gathered from variety of sources, not from one source, but from a variety of sources, and they had made use of that information to their best advantage. And that is what the governor would have prevented.
Can I also, adding to all this conversation we've been having about Prime Minister sort of playing this blame game, kind of saying, I told so-and-so to look into this, and, there is a clear conflict of interest there too, as we were just discussing with Arjuna Mahendran and Arjuna Aloysius. But we elected the public elected the Prime Minister. It is true that it goes all back to the monetary board, but doesn't the Prime Minister have some responsibility? Can he just wipe his hands clean easily and say, I've done my bit? Does he not have responsibility to follow through with this? Because he is answerable to us, and the governor of the central bank is not.
No, in terms of the Monetary Act, it's the governor of the central bank who has the responsibility. But of course, when it comes to the overall responsibility of running the country, that is the cabinet headed by the Prime Minister.
But this goes back to that. This whole thing affects...
That's right. So Prime Minister should have seen to it also, because if Governor Mahendran has not taken an action, it's the job of the Prime Minister to see that Mahendran, to deal with Mahendran. So that has not happened.
Can I just come in to clarify one point? I think we are going on a tangent here at this moment, because we keep on talking about this conflict of interest of Aloysius continuing as a director. The factual situation is Arjuna Aloysius was not a director of Perpetual Treasuries, that particular company, when Arjuna Mahendran was appointed. I will give the dates. Arjuna Aloysius resigned from his directorate from Perpetual Treasuries on the 16th of January. Arjuna Mahendran was appointed, his letter was given on the 23rd of January. So let us not confuse these things. I mean, this is a forum where we talk sense and facts. Yeah. So there is no conflict of interest as far as the appointment was concerned. If the Prime Minister beforehand knew that he was the son-in-law, he was operating a primary dealers company and he was having deals with the central bank, and if he asked Arjuna Mahendran to ask him to resign, well, he has done his job. The Prime Minister. What more do you expect the Prime Minister to do? To go behind Arjuna Mahendran to see whether he has been doing this? If Arjuna Mahendran has not done it, he is at fault.
But is there anyone to monitor Arjuna Mahendran as the governor of central bank?
What is happening today is the public officer,
the whole cabinet
officer has missed the bus. He has done the wrong thing.
It seems that the Prime Minister knew that there was a bond scam that took place on the 27th of February. He is aware of what happened in 2016 April as well.
Yes.
If that is the case, knowing that Governor Arjuna Mahendran was at fault, why did he continue to appoint him as an advisor?
These are very relevant issues.
Now, so why?
These are the questions. These are the questions that should have been asked, and they should have been clarified. Not whether he gave a directive. It is just one part of it. Whether there was a conflict of interest. There are so many other important things that should have come out from the minister in charge of the subject in this context.
Why, Mr. Varadkar?
I believe it's very simple. Ranil Wickremesinghe wants Arjuna Mahendran in his office, Ravi Karunanayak in office, so that they will not become state witnesses.
Mr. Tennakoon, now when all of this happened, now you mentioned several dates also.
State witnesses, the whole thing.
Game finished.
Mr. Varadkar, just a very quick
Mr. Hemant Varadkar came to the right point. Yes. I mean, here, today, what I felt, just after this session, of course, there's a possibility that the Arjuna Mahendran might come as the state witness. Because now, what we felt is that the ball is on his court.
Mr. Varadkar,
he can come out and explain what exactly happened.
When you look at the cabinet of ministers and who are surrounding the Prime Minister, all of them are from the same school. So,
I'm also from the same school.
Are you from the same school as well?
Yeah. If that, Samir, I'm ashamed. At Royal College, we learned something called not done. That is something that you should not never do. If you associate with crooks, then you don't come into that circle. Then you become a crook.
So next time,
if you happen. If I were the Prime Minister, if I knew that Ravi Karunanayak and Arjuna Mahendran was involved in some kind of thing, do you think I'll keep him? I mean, Royal College has taught us to sack them and then get other people to replace them. So why you can't do that? If you are a crook, if I were responsible for all the crookishness, then I'll want to protect him.
So do you regret going to Royal and not?
I don't regret Royal. I regret these people have not learned the basic lesson that was taught to every student at Royal College.
Mr. Varadkar Surya, the Attorney General's Department forwarded questions to the Prime Minister. 33 questions was raised by the Attorney General's Department. Only 20 was sent to the Prime Minister for written submissions. Why? Why not the rest of the 13?
No, that you must ask the commissioners. Because the Attorney General's Department has submitted the commissioners to be their questions, and the commissioners have thought only these 20 questions are relevant and sent to the Prime Minister. And I can't understand why the Prime Minister or any witness before a commission should know the questions in advance.
Yeah.
What is the reason? I have found this in the question of civil procedure interrogatories where sometimes it is very difficult to find people. They are abroad. they can't come to Sri Lanka, then these questions are sent ahead. But then why should, and even if that is done, now everyone is saying the Prime Minister has come here for the first time in the history of this country. I am asking you, Samir, was there any Prime Minister who had been summoned, has been associated with this or any scam? No. There were no allegations against the Prime Minister while they were sitting on as the Prime Minister of this country. So this is the first time the Prime Minister had to come and even explain his conduct, the manner in which he examined, manner in which he came, because he took over the central bank under his authority, which are normally under the Minister of Finance, and he went to Parliament, defended Arjuna Mahendran, then he appointed a commission, and then did nothing about it, and he allowed, after the first scam, he allowed Arjuna Mahendran to do the second scam in March, which we lost about 1 trillion rupees.
Mr. Varakurasuri, a lot of people, I'll get back to you, Mr. Thenakol. Mr. Varakurasuri, a lot of people have so much of confidence on this Commission of Inquiry appointed by the President. And the President himself has said...
Not that I don't have... I'm
but you seem to be very pessimistic about the outcome of
I'm thankful to the Commissioners because of the independent stand they have taken. A lot of people gave information. I'm thankful to Mr. Sasanta Kodagoda and Mr. Dapula Rivera, in spite of various obstacles, in spite of the fact that their entire career is at jeopardy, they did all this for the country. I'm thankful to the police officers, CID officers who did this. Now, but still for all, ultimately, the Commissioner will have to write a report on the evidence that is available. And once that is written, we do not know what the President would do. Even the President sends a copy of the report, then the Attorney General will have to decide on the question of indictment. Now, I'm telling you a very simple example. Ravi Karunanayaka's case, where he was indicted by the Attorney General, and he was discharged on a frivolous objection taken by the defense. And the court, on the last day she sat on the bench, she said, I'm discharging all the accused, but permitting the Attorney General to file a fresh case. Have they filed it up to now?
Dr. Wijewardena, we speak about this 3-member committee appointed by Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, and you were an advisor to this 3-member committee as well. What was the outcome and what was the recommendations like?
Well, my role, Samir, was there to educate the 3 lawyers of what is meant by a bond, how the bond...
Because the lawyers were not aware.
Because they were not aware, actually. We'll have to admit the fact that... Yeah, I mean, nobody is aware of what a bond is. So I was asked by Prime Minister himself to support the committee. So I did it without getting any payment on my own. And I helped the committee members to understand the entire transaction, even to ask relevant questions from the witnesses and so forth. And when I saw the terms of reference of the committee, it completely disappointed me, because the TOR was to find out the bond issues from 2012 to 2015, of which the particular bond issue was only one installment. So therefore, it was a kind of a diluted terms of reference. And even then, I will give credit to this Gamini Pitipana committee, because they, in their report, they have recommended, as Mr. Hemant Wanukula has said, there is a case for conducting a forensic audit. And there had been some irregularity in the public debt department of the central bank, and there is some kind of an inside information being leaked to one particular, they have said one particular primary dealer, and that has to be investigated. Then they said that the government has to take action against the people who had caused a loss to the government.
They also said their hands are tied because the terms of reference doesn't permit them to go.
I'll get back to you. Yeah. Yes, Dr.
So what has happened is none of these things were followed up by the government, and we know the results now. As a result of that, the people who had been on to the first bond scam, they became very bold, and they continued to play the game in a different manner.
Mr. Varakurasuri, I'll get back to you. Dr. Wijewardena, what is important right now is to understand You had a first bond scam, as you correctly mentioned, and then there was a second bond scam.
Not the second, Samir, it was a series of bond scams. Yeah. And but of course the modus operandi that they had used was completely different from the first one. Because what has happened is, you know, they have created this network of people operating in the state-led funds like the EPF, ETF, then Insurance Corporation and the National Savings Bank. And all these people were brought into a network of information providers and also the people who would act on the instructions given by the perpetual treasuries. So as a result, it was a series.
What has to be focused right now is on the bond scam. But what has transpired, the involvement of former Finance Minister Ravi Karunalayake, having a penthouse in one of the biggest apartment complexes in the city, is important. Having telephone conversations with an individual who wrote a book, who said nothing went wrong, is important. It's important to understand who was in the COPE committee and what was discussed with them by Arjun Aloysius. All these are important, isn't it?
Yes.
The time starts
all those things are important, no doubt. And there are many other important things. The contradictions made in the statement given by the Prime Minister to the Parliament on the 17th March, very important. From my point of view, the entire focus would have been on the speech that on the statement that he made on the 17th of March. That was the first official explanation that the government tendered to a commotion that went countrywide about this bond scam on the 27th. But so many contradictions are there. This Prime Minister said in his statement, this money was required to be raised, this additional sum, to pay to the contractors, road highways. In his same statement, a little below, he says this money was wanted to be sent to the development councils. Can I quote it? His own words, he says, the monies that were raised were paid to the treasury to fund the divisional level development projects. And he says that the money went there. A diabolical misrepresentation.
You want to say
I don't want to say that. In contradicting his own statement. So there are so many things. If he was properly questioned, properly cross-examined, there are several other things that should have come out. Unfortunately, the democracy of ours is a little better than Zimbabwe and a little civilized. For that reason, I think, we had a undue respect paid to a witness without embarrassing him. He was asked to go.
When you heard the statement that was delivered by Kabir Hashim and also Malik Samaravikrama, there seems to be again a contradiction.
Definitely.
And why is that?
Definitely. The Prime Minister himself in his statement on the 17th said we wanted 15 billion. It's in black and white.
Yeah.
And Ravi Karunalayake, the former Minister of Finance, writes a letter, undated letter, to the Governor of the Central Bank. Oh no, it's not addressed to anybody. To whom it may concern. He sends a certificate-like thing saying that we wanted 175 billion or 75 billion.
Yeah, 75.
Now, all these are contradictions, no? Somebody will have to explain this. I think in the end, unfortunately, the commission needs to wind up next week or so. Unfortunately, there are so many things to which Kirti wanted so many questions asked as a member of the public. Not what he wanted asked. This is what the public is raising. And in this commission, whatever is said and done, with respect, I want to state one thing. This Mr. Dappula de Oliveira very clearly one day told in this commission that this, when he was told that don't think of the media, he said, no, I am thinking of the media because this commission is a public affair and it is in public interest. The very Gazette notification issued by the President clearly says, I appoint this commission in the national interest.
Actually, this question has been sent to me by one of our Newsline viewers. It's welcome to be asked here. Can you please ask Mr. Hemanta whether if we had an honest judiciary with a backbone, then none of these things would have happened. That they are all guilty of enabling these politicians.
Yeah. No, I don't agree with that sentiment. I think the judiciary is comparatively quite honest. In this case, what happened was that the commissioners, with their limited mandate and with their focus on the main bond scam, did exclude the Prime Minister, and the two other ministers, and they did not question them the way that Mr. De Vera questioned Ravi Karunanayake. Now that is where the fault lies. As far as Mr. Tendakon said, I must correct him. Department representative Mr. Dappul De Vera or Mr. Shasanta Kodao did not pose a single question to these two witnesses. That is the controversial thing that I went and said in the news line. They did not question, only the commissioners questioned them. Then the Attorney General, the very, very mild, soft-spoken person, I mean, questions him on the question that have been already given to him. And then there were reasons. He could have started the question, and as far as to show their courtesy to the Prime Minister, but permitted Dappula De Vera and Yasanta Kodagada, who is very familiar with this, to question him. That was not permitted. Therefore, everyone whom I met after
it was a matter of protocol. That's what it was. A matter of protocol.
No, there were no. I agree. When the Prime Minister comes with the Attorney General, but the Attorney General normally what happens is as a special courtesy, he comes and puts forward 2 or 3 questions and then permits the person who is well versed with the subject. I mean, these two gentlemen have studied this for 6 months or during the duration of the commission, and they have they have worked day and night. The Attorney General has only a limited focus. So therefore, he would have permitted, and that was not permitted. That is why most people are concerned, like the person who made those remarks.
As of the 27th of February, it will be 3 years since the initial alleged bond scam. And as you mentioned, there was a series of scams thereafter involving the payment of bribes to officials at state institutions. Little Charlie, Big Charlie, Little Johnny, and Big Johnny. My question is this: funds have been siphoned out of this country through billions of rupees have been siphoned out from the state through these series of scams. What steps can be taken to get any of this back?
About this, the bank in Switzerland, Nadeem, we had been telling that Joe Nexter, the founding governor of the central bank, had very clearly said the governor of the central bank should be a person of unquestioned integrity. So that would have been a matter for the appointing authority at that time, because if the person's integrity had already been tested somewhere else in the world, the person should have been appointed as to that.
Because this raises 2 questions as well, right?
Yeah.
And you remember that specific private bank we're talking about. Back in 2013, there was a leak, the so-called Swiss leaks, where the names of several Sri Lankans were unveiled.
Yeah. But of course, about the other question that you raised,
around the same time that this person who is currently, who was,
I mean, not only that time,
was the managing director at the time.
Particular bank was again fined by the US authorities for laundering the drug money of Mexico and also the monies belonging to Iran at that time, and there had been a series of cases against that particular bank. But of course, about the recovery of this money, the process now available to Sri Lanka is to, after the report is submitted by the Commission to the President, the AG department has to take action through the normal laws of the country and then recover the money back to Sri Lanka. That's how it has been.
We have a guarantee given by the Prime Minister on your issue now. Shall I read it, please? One sentence.
Yes.
That's very important.
The Prime Minister has said in his statement to Parliament on the 17th like this. මෙතන වුණු සිද්ධිය ගැන පමණක් නෙවෙයි. අතීතයේදී සිදු වුණු ඒවා ගැනත් අපි සොයා බලා කටයුතු කරනවා. ඒ හැම එකකටම අපි යම්කිසි බද්දක් පනවනවා. අවශ්‍ය නම් ඒ මුදල් ආපසු අය කරගන්නවා. Why worry? The Prime Minister says, wait till he passes the laws. He has given it to the legal draftsman already.
When will he pass the law? He sent it to the draftsman.
It is before the this delay is in the Attorney General's department. They are not drafting it properly.
So then again, I want to ask you a question. There were 31 UNP MPs and ministers who accompanied the Prime Minister to the Presidential Commission. They went in with the Prime Minister, they came out and they basically said the same thing. They said, you know, we didn't get calls from the party that was mentioned. We were not in the COPE. So ask them, ask the wrongdoers. But at this moment, they seem to be disowning the people who are supposedly the wrongdoers in the UNP. While if you take a look back at what has happened, a person writes a letter without a heading to whom it may concern. One person has an apartment, another person writes a book, another person sits at a meeting where he is not required to. So this has been a collective effort altogether. But now they say, no, it's not me, it's not me, it's not me. What's happening?
I think this is a case of the rats running out, no? One by one. So they dissociate themselves from the sinking ship. They dissociate themselves from these bad doings and they try to be good boys. And if they are good, well, they can continue. My own personal view is, whoever is good and who has not done anything bad can remain and this setup can continue. But if they are bad, let them face the music.
Mr. Varnakula Surya, one of the most important things that we'll be hoping for from the report of the Commission of Inquiry is that criminality will be established, that a crime has been committed. Judging by what you've seen over the past, over the term of the Commission, the report is due on the 8th?
8th of December.
On the 8th of December. Do you see that criminality being established? Under which laws could the Attorney General then prosecute the offenders?
Yeah, I believe if the commissioners will go through the evidence, and there are two aspects of it. One is the criminal aspect of it, the civil aspect of it, where the commissioners will order civil action to be taken against them for the recovery of the money, and the criminal action for money laundering and various other offences, and also the entire scam, the whole process of what happened was a criminal element. Now that is a matter that must be decided by the Attorney General. Once the Commission makes a recommendation, the Attorney General will have to take serious cognizance of what the Commission have said and decide what course of action. They can then independently investigate and file action. But there is one problem about the money laundering. Now I believe, now this is what I say, this is what I told Faraz also, that sometimes I feel sorry that nothing would happen. Now if you examine the evidence of Ravi Karunanayake, I mean any layman could come to the conclusion he is obviously committed, obviously come within the offences under the Money Laundering Act. The monies that he kept without any, I mean he cannot explain.
So who should be held accountable for this? Is it
the
Attorney
I mean not only
Department?
according to his own testimony, not only he, his family, children, everyone. But the problem is,
who should be held accountable for not taking action? Is it the Attorney General's Department?
No. I mean the evidence came only a few days ago. No, I mean so therefore after that the Attorney General would wait till the report is completed. Yeah. But I have been always saying in public debate, the Attorney General can take cognizance of what happened in court. They don't have to wait for the report. I gave an example also. When the Lalit
So can the Bribery Commission? So can the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery?
No, not bribery. I'm saying that the criminal element of it. I said that during the independence of the Lalit Athalat Mudali Commission, when the evidence came up, absolute false evidence, but the Attorney General took action and arrested them and remanded them until the Supreme Court, discharged all of them. So my position is, even today, even now, the Attorney General can take action. But the problem, the question is, if the Attorney General did not pay any heed to a case that went on for 6 years, where a young State Council did admirable job of prosecuting, and they found a technical flaw in the charge sheet.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Warankrishnan. I just got to get this one in quickly here. Mr. Rusripal, you've been very quiet there. But if you were able to have asked the Prime Minister 3 questions, what would you have asked him?
My first question would be, why did you decide to appoint Arjuna Mahendra, knowing that he is a non-citizen?
But that's not really relevant, is it?
It is.
Why?
It is relevant.
What's wrong?
It is relevant in the context of what has transpired. Now, when the accountability comes, his questionability, his responsibility, all that arises out of that.
And the second question,
yes.
Why did he give this directive to the governor, and how did he expect the directive to be implemented?
And the third one?
The third one, why did he not question the new governor of the central bank when the new governor and the monetary board changed his own directive and reverted back to the previous system?
Auction system.
It is an insult to the Prime Minister.
Mr. Denagon, I have a question to ask you. Sorry, Nanel. One question. Now, the governor of the central bank, when he was appointed, Arjuna Mahendran, was completing the tenure of the previous governor. He had 1 more year, so he was put in that to fill in that 1 year. When the extension time came, the president advised the Prime Minister not to appoint Arjuna Mahendran as the governor of the central bank.
Yes.
But the Prime Minister has once again gone against that and appointed Arjuna Mahendran when he was as the governor of the central bank. Now we see the state minister who has written a book going on a state media channel and telling that the president has not looked into this matter, the president has not instructed properly, the president has to do something about it. But hasn't the president already looked into it and said do not appoint Arjuna Mahendran as the governor?
No, the end has justified what has happened. In the end, what happened? Did Arjuna Mahendran was he reappointed? He was not. They may have tried, applied pressure, all kinds of things, but in the end what happened was, he was not appointed. He was totally rejected. And the persons who were responsible to make the recommendation for the president to decide who to be appointed were asked to nominate names. And they nominated 3 names, and 1 was selected by the president, and he was appointed.
And in this utopian world that you might live in, what would you like to see happen at the end?
The end is very clear. Whatever happens as the recommendation of the commission, this country has concluded who the perpetrators are, what should be done to them. The public at large know that these people should never hold any positions in the future in this country.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to get this one in.
And all the illegitimately earned income, whether laws are passed or not, people will agitate that they be
And what would you do with Mr. Wickramasinghe? What would you do with him? What would the penalty be?
I mean, there's nothing special to be done with him. All what you do to others will apply to him.
Mr. Tenkon, I want to pick up on something you said in your opening, but I'm going to come to Mr. Warankrishnan on this one. I want to talk about, intervention, intrusion, government intrusion, political intrusion in these, supposedly independent bodies like the central bank and, other things like COPE, sort of influences. Legally, in a legal perspective, intervention, unwarranted intervention, can lead to corruption, and it does. So corruption is a crime. Legally, what is the framework that's in place to kind of monitor this or kind of convict, or what's in place in Sri Lanka to?
We have corruption. We have the
specifically
the
government intervention
to investigate corruption. Bribery and corruption. That is there. But, I'm very sorry to say the process is very slow. Then the Attorney General's Department the Criminal Investigation Department can probe into this and file appropriate action in the High Court. Why my plea to the Intelligence Department was, don't wait till the report is out. There is sufficient evidence for you to act upon and then start an investigation, because you must understand the evidence that will be revealed at the commission cannot be used in a court of law. Right. There is some immunity. So therefore you must start an investigation. They have already started an investigation. The government must, the president must back them, and the president must take all constraints. Now at the moment they are taking personal revenge. Now from Mr. Dappula Rivera's wife is being harassed by this government. She's a government servant. Then also Mr. Jasanta Kodagoda, Mr. Ravi Karunanak has wanted a select committee appointed for the submissions he made. Then thereafter, today Mr. Sumantaran has gone to the court and said, we are going to have you, and we are going to have a judicial committee to inquire into the telephone tapping case. So you understand how even the members of the TNA and even the JVP might
Mr. Vanakur, sir, you need to take responsibility on the part that you said about Mr. De Rivera's wife.
Absolutely, I have got information that she is being harassed, mainly because of the fact that she is married to Dappula Rivera.
So thank you very much for joining us this evening on the show. For the last 2.5 years, we've been vocal. We've told you what was going on from day number 1. And if I could safely say that all this has transpired because of one network, and that's News First. We've taken the forefront. We've been with the public. We've aired stories, most of the time telling the people as to what went wrong, ensuring that justice prevails. One final advice for the President of the country, Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, Mr. Maithripala Sirisena. The speed of decision-making is the essence of good governance. The ball is in your court now. You will have to act. Take care and good night.